Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. Along with Sean Francis, I am Brian Altunian. And as parents and caregivers of children with disabilities, it's one thing to imagine parenting and caregiving when our children are small, but what happens when our children grow, become young adults, and we get older as well? So today's conversation is going to be an amazing conversation about a program that exists to help support aging parents of disabled adult children. It's going to be fascinating. Didn't even know this program existed. So I'm excited for today's conversation. Hope you are too. You're ready for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hi, I'm Brian Altunian along with Sean Francis and another episode of Just Two Dads. We started this podcast about 4 years ago with the idea of shining a spotlight on the folks that are doing amazing things for the special needs community. Today's guest is in those along those lines, caregiver of and parent of a child with disability as well. And so today's conversation is going to be all about programs that are available to families of special needs children. Before we get started, just wanted to say thank you to Billy Footwear for always being a good friend and sponsor of our program, Adaptive Footwear for people of all ages, sizes, and abilities. Amazing organization, and the story about Billy Price, the CEO, is also fascinating. We'll be talking about some other things as well. We'll get into that after towards the end of the show, but for now, we're going to jump right into it and say hello to Sean Francis, my co-host. Last week we had some technical difficulties. I think we've resolved most of them today. We'll see. And by the way, I'm just going to say this. If you're catching us on video, you'll see that it may glitch out. This is life as it comes. We don't polish. We're not produced, because for parents of children who have some sort of disability or special needs issue, life comes at us as it comes. We aren't beautifully produced. So we may lose you. I hope we don't, Sean. I hope we don't. We ride this one. So
let's get into it. We should change the name of the show to the adaptability syndrome or something like that. I don't know. Or just call it Be Flexible.
Be flexible. Exactly.
Yeah.
But you look great.
At any rate, yeah. Well,
there we go.
Thank you. I am excited about today's show. I know I say that with every episode, but that's the blessing of the opportunity to do this show and interact with fantastic people. And our guest today is no exception. And she is, I feel like I'm trying to get my ducks in a row in terms of her credentials and everything that she does, but I'll let her do the majority of that. As you said, she's a parent, she's a caregiver, she's a warrior, a person with a kind heart who adds value to the community in general, but especially to the caregiving and special needs community. And welcome to Just Two Dads, Felisa Strickland. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Sean. I'm so happy to be here and share a little bit about Caring Futures, but also just to share a little bit about my parenting journey of my daughter, Lily, who is almost 25. So for the last 25 years, I have taken lots of different paths. You think you have it figured out 1 minute and then you're on to the next thing. So she's the reason. She's the reason for it all. And I'm very happy to be here with you both today.
Great.
Fantastic. You and I were talking yesterday, and I was telling you that with Father's Day coming upon us at the time of this recording, I feel like, I've been a stepfather, legal guardian, adoptive parent, and a biological parent. And my biological son is 19 years old as of last month. And yet I feel like I'm just finding out what it means to be a dad, or having dad redefined, so to speak. So I think that has a lot to do with life's changes and the world's changes. But why don't we go ahead and, start with telling us about Caring Futures and how that came to be, what they do, and what you do with them.
Oh, I would love to do that. Well, first of all, what you just said is the reason why I got involved in the first place. I realized when my daughter became an adult that we were getting ready to traverse something that I was completely, like, I thought I knew everything already, right? Like, I knew my daughter, I knew her preferences, I knew what she liked, what she didn't like, how to care for her. And then all of a sudden she turned 18 and she changed her mind about all of that. And, like, you think because you've been doing it all their life, right? And my daughter
Mhm.
does. She requires support with just about everything in her life. She's mobile most of the time, and she can do some things independently. But as far as day-to-day care and help with decisions and things like that, she needs support. But she also, has a mind of her own, and she knows what she wants, and she knows how to express herself. And that became more challenging when she got older. And doing it for 25 years, almost 25 years, I'm getting tired. Like, it doesn't come as easy to me. And just like
No.
most people, when you get older, your patience is thinner, and depending on the circumstances, of course. But
Right.
anyway, Futures presented an opportunity for me to get involved and learn at the same time. And so, I really was looking for a community that was going through the same thing that I was going through. And since I was already sitting on the board of the ARC of California, it was an opportunity to get involved with what does that look like for our families. So I'm very honored and privileged to be a part of helping to create the program and to facilitate it. I'm an instructor for their classes. The program itself is called Caring Futures, and Caring Futures was really created out of this need to help aging parent caregivers find some community and some access to resources and paths for what does future planning look like. Because when you get caught up in the day-to-day caregiving part of it, you get
Mhm.
sidetracked, and it's not always easy to fit in the things you need to be doing 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or even next week. You get
Right.
caught
Right.
up in the day to day. So that's sort of how it came to be. And I can go into lots of detail about the classes and all the different offerings. One of them is our Caring Conversations, which I'm looking forward to hosting the both of you on in just a couple of
Mhm.
weeks.
Right.
But those are conversations with people that have access to resources and thoughts and ideas that can help parent caregivers and caregivers in general just, you know, access information. And information
Mhm.
is what helps us get to the next, right? So, and helps us and comforts us, right? Like, that gives us some idea of, first of all, that we're not alone. And secondly, that, somebody's done this before us. And so therefore there is a roadmap for it. So
Right.
that's part of it. I mean, just being able to help families is really what intrigued me. And that's born because I need that help myself.
That's fantastic, and we're looking forward to the opportunity as well. We'll make sure that we promote that as well. So, what is your daughter's diagnosis, if you don't mind sharing with us, and
Oh,
at
not
what
at
age was
all.
she diagnosed?
Yeah, not at all. And I've talked with Lily about all of that, and she's fine with our journey on this path. I mean, she is a partner in it. Um,
Mhm.
her diagnosis initially, her first diagnosis was cerebral palsy. She's also later was diagnosed with autism. She's intellectual disability and also epilepsy. So
Mm.
she's got quite a few different health challenges, but overall is a happy, well-adjusted, and for the most part healthy. I mean, she's got some challenges, but she's healthy in general, and well-adjusted. Yeah.
Amazing. Does and you had said it earlier. She requires 24/7 support.
Yeah, she does require, just for safety concerns, and
Sure.
also she requires support for all the things she would need to do. I mean, she can navigate the house independently, like move from one room to the next. But if she needed to go in the kitchen and make something to eat, that's not something she could do independently. She can go in there and pick something, from the cabinet, but she's not necessarily going to be able to open the package and, navigate all of the things that goes with that. So she really does need support for just about everything she does. But tell her that she wants to be the opposite, right? And that's where some of the challenges came into her becoming an adult and me
Mhm.
having to learn as the parent and as the caregiver that I need to give her some space to do that. And
Right.
that was tricky for me to navigate, right? Because I thought
Mhm.
that what I was doing was best for her, but we don't always know what's best for our
No.
kids. And
Sure.
that's a whole nother subject, but they all sort of tie together. And that's what's made this, that's part of the curriculum for Future Is Now is we talk about that. We talk about that um, opportunity for our loved ones that we're caring for to be able to be very involved as best they can in the choices that we make for their future.
Mhm.
Because we can't just assume all the time that we know what they want or what, especially if there's a communication barrier or they don't communicate typically. And Lily
Right.
uses an AAC device to communicate, but she doesn't communicate with me on it as well as she does some of her caregivers and friends, and
Mm.
that's a typical parent child relationship though, right? And
Right.
so
Yeah.
there are so many of these different things that are really not unusual, but in our world of special needs we don't always consider those as being something that's going to happen, right? And so then in one breath I'm like elated that she's going through this. And on the other, I'm just like, well, how do I navigate it? What do I do with it? Because I
Yeah.
thought I was going the right way. And then I have to, shift. So, yeah, it's been a big learning experience for sure.
Yeah. And that's why we need each other as well too, because um, we only know what we know. It's Einstein's saying that you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness at which it occurs. So you're close to the matter. You have to be able to step away from it to sort of absorb things. I can't. It seems like every day, especially for the last month, I've just gotten these reminders of how thick my head is, so to speak. Um, I cut my son's hair. I cut it once a week, and partially for independence, and I think partially from a behavioral standpoint, it grows fairly fast. I've lost some hair at my age, but I still have a fair amount, but I keep it this short. So he likes to keep his hair cut kind of like mine. What he's been doing is cutting it. So we cut hair on Thursdays. He's cutting it on other days. And it's like we just cut it. It doesn't need to be cut. And what he's doing as he does that is just kind of patchy in the back and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I got to straighten it out. And then I realized, but wait a minute. If I leave him alone and let him do that, let him walk around with it a little patchy, he's going to eventually get good at it. And the fact that he's trying to do it on his own, that's a blessing. So the whole thing about the balancing between giving him fish and teaching him the fish, it never ends. Never.
No, so true.
Going back, listen, I have an 18-year-old neurotypical child who has more respects his teachers and shares more things with those folks than with his parents. So I get it.
Yeah.
I understand that dynamic is real too. So let me ask you this: how did you find the arc when you were doing your? I don't know what my phone's doing. How did you find the arc when you were searching for resources? How did that come about?
Thank you for asking about that because actually, when Lily and I moved to Santa Barbara in at the end of 2012, and by 2014, I got involved with Alpha Resource Center, which I connected with through the regional center here in Santa Barbara. And we moved from Virginia. We had just recently lost her father. So we moved, thank you. We moved to California because most of my family was here in California, and my sister had just recently moved to Santa Barbara. So when we moved here, we didn't know very many people. But one of the blessings that came to be very quickly was I met and found Alpha Resource Center, which is a chapter of the ARC of California. That's the local chapter here in Santa Barbara. And so I immediately started to attend support groups there while Lily was at school, met a lot of wonderful other parents and families. And then I got so excited to have this community that I just started doing whatever they were offering. Like if they were offering advocacy training or parent mentorship. And then eventually I took a class with them for Family Voices of California. And then, we just continued on that. We would go on advocacy trips to Sacramento with Alpha and other organizations. And Lily was always a part of that. And then eventually I was asked to join their governance committee. And so I joined Alpha's governance committee. And part of the role in being involved with the Alpha board was to have a parent rep for the ARC of California. And so I volunteered to do that because I was interested. I've just always, Lily is the reason why I got into advocacy in the first place. But now I realize it's not just about her. It's about advocating for all of us as families in the disability community. So that's how I got connected with the ARC. And then eventually I joined their board. And I'm currently the chair of the Alpha Resource Center board and secretary for the ARC of California board.
Wow.
They kind of go together.
Wow.
It was like you didn't want to just take advantage of the classes, but also participate in the governance and
I didn't know where the journey was taking me, but I was just following the path, and that's kind of where we've landed. So, they're all connected, and one place led me to the next, and so and then that's what led me. Being on the ARC California board is what connected me to Caring Futures, and I'm so glad that it did.
Wow. Now, hopefully it's not too soon for us to, because we touched on some of the services. But I'm curious as to your path. Brian, you let me know if you think my timing is off. I'm just curious now as to your path in terms of where you come from, how you were raised, all those types of things, because, how we face a day of diagnosis has everything to do with where we come from. All heroes have their powers from their origin. So let us know about that. How did that come to be?
Yeah, well, I don't have a traditional upbringing, that's for sure. It came with its bumps and bruises along the way. That's so I didn't grow up in a typical family. I lived the first 9 years of my life with my mother in Virginia. And then after that, my dad came into the picture, and then, he kind of bounced us all over the place. And eventually we landed in San Diego around, I was probably in 13, I think. And so I grew up mostly in San Diego until I was about 30. And then I moved back to Virginia. And that's where I met Lily's dad shortly after I moved there. And I have family there because that's where I was born. And so, so I stayed there for another 20 years. And then, like I said, we lost Lily's dad. And so that's what brought me back to California. But I think the challenges of my life, and I won't go into all the details, but there were many along the way. Some of them of my own doing. But I think all of that led me to this place where I really wanted to be a parent. But in my early 30s, right after I moved to Virginia, I was told that I couldn't be a parent. Like I was never going to have kids, right? And then I met this wonderful man, Lily's dad, and I knew this was the person that I wanted to be with. And then the next thing I know, we find out we're going to have a baby. And it was like, wait, but that's not supposed to happen. But it did. And so, we didn't know at that point what that was going to look like. But as soon as she was born, I knew my life was changed forever. And even though very shortly after she was born, we could tell that, development was not happening in a typical fashion, it didn't seem to change my feelings about any of it. We knew it was going to be harder, but it didn't matter because she was something that was an unexpected blessing, so to speak. That was not something I thought was going to happen for me. And it was something that I'd always wanted. And so the fact that it did just meant that that's where my focus was supposed to be. So shortly after, and before I had Lily, I was a district sales manager for the Limited store. Well, not for the Limited, but for Structure, which was a men's
The
men's
parent.
division.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
remember
remember.
that? Do you guys
Sure.
remember
Right.
that? Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
I was a district sales manager for them for the state of Virginia, basically most of Virginia. And that was a pretty intense job. Like I traveled a lot, you know. Anyway, about 2 years into it, we realized that Lily was, you know, going to need a lot of support. So I decided that that's where I wanted to put my energy. So I stepped
Mhm.
away from that career and I decided to make her my focus. And sure enough, we dived into therapies, you know, we had therapy probably 3 or 4 times a week. And, you know, life became, you know, not what I had planned on, but she has led me every step of the way. And, you know, you mentioned, we were talking earlier, Brian, about my piece in the book for Becoming Brave Together. And that's what I talk about in there, is that she is just sort of the motivation for, and has charted the path for me, but also for her, you know. So together we're just going with the flow of where life is taking us.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
it's really helped me to learn, you know, to unlearn a lot of things too. You know, like there's this way you think you're supposed to be doing things all the time, and it's not necessarily true. You know, a lot of times you have to be able to be flexible with whatever is coming into your path at the moment, and learning how to respond maybe differently than you thought you would. That's one thing that I learned very quickly, is that I was not going to be, you know, when I left my career, I had this vision of what is it going to look like to be a stay-at-home mom.
Mhm.
Well, you know, most of us think that's, oh, great, I'm going to get to spend more time with my kids, and we're going to finger paint, and we're going to go, you know, we're going to do all these things. And once I did it, I went through a lot of depression, to be honest with you, because it wasn't like that. It was a very challenging situation to go from, you know, uh, a career to an outside the home career to, you know, this very challenging, unpredictable day every day. Like I never knew what the day was going to hold, and I had
Sure.
very little control of what Lily's day was going to be like. And so it was challenging to learn how to do it. It took me about 4 or 5 years of being in that role to finally get to a place where I was at peace with it, you know,
Mhm.
and have no regret about being in it. And then
And
once I did that, you know, there's never been any regret about making that choice. It's a very easy choice.
and as Fliss, you were the primary caregiver. How much of caregiving was Lily's dad involved in? Was he as involved as you? As he, obviously he was working outside the home and doing what he could to
He,
provide.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was, but when I mentioned the first couple of years, I continued with my career, right? So
Yeah.
I traveled a
Mhm.
lot. That left him at home with Lily, you know. So and he was right there for it. You know, he was actually the one that took her to the doctor on her 1 year checkup, where they finally decided to say, you know, I think we need to do some early intervention, and kind of just, you know, we don't have a clear picture yet, but things are not moving in a typical fashion. And I remember him calling me and saying, well, this is what they're saying. And, you know, and I remember us feeling like, well, that's okay. We still have time. Like we were new parents, and you know, very unexpectedly didn't know what it was supposed to look like. But yeah, he
Right.
was very involved. And you know, later on, and we were engaged. I'm going to go ahead and put this out there. We were engaged. We got engaged when we found out we were going to have Lily. And then
Mhm.
we had Lily and a new house and lifetime, and, you know, developmental delays. And so we never got to the actual getting married part. But, and shortly after Lily's diagnosis came Lars's diagnosis with melanoma. So,
Mhm.
so it seemed like life was just always coming at us in different ways. And so eventually, in an effort to take better care of himself, you know, we split up. But in that moment, what we learned was that there was there was still a lot of love, but in order for us to be the best parents for her and to take the best care of ourselves, that we were going to do that separated.
Separately.
That
Wow.
what that did was gave him an opportunity to really be engaged. Because once I gave up my career, then I'm not, it's not unusual for most of the caregiving then became my job, because I made that choice that I wanted to make that my job.
Sure.
Right.
I hate to use the word job, but you know what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of stress that was coming at us there, because he wasn't as involved as he had been before. Then,
Mhm.
her developmental delays, then his cancer. And then, once we separated, there was some defined, when are you going to do it and when am I going to do it? And so then we both were able to work together to be really hands-on caregivers. And he was very, he looked forward to his time with her. And he was, to this day, I miss him, because he is the only person that really knew what my day-to-day life looks
Mhm.
like.
For sure.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I think it's interesting too that you said job but didn't want to really define it as such. But we can be, as I told you about my own experience, realizing that I'm not just a parent, we are caregivers, because I just thought of a caregiver as someone who cares for the elderly. But you can be a parent first and foremost, and then still have caregiving as a job that you would, do at the, a heartbeat. Both things can coexist. So don't feel bad about that at all. One doesn't negate the other at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's part of the growing that I was referring to, initially, because with every challenge that we have had, there's something to be learned in that, right? And so I think that at this point, I almost welcome them, because I look forward to whatever it is I'm going to learn from it.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Mhm.
and your challenges become lessons for other folks. A lot of times, Sean and I talk about like, wow, what do I have to complain about? Because we've encountered so many challenges that, would be so overwhelming for some people. It's amazing. And you share a lot of this story in the book for the We Are Brave Together organization. Yes. Yeah.
A little bit of it. I didn't get into as great a detail as I did just now, because I think the context is important. You were asking about him as a caregiver, and
Absolutely.
there was the before
Yeah.
we split up, and then there was the after, and then there was the in between, when we tried,
Mhm.
when we were really going through a lot of things for a new family to go through. And so it's, at this point, yes, it was painful to split up, but that's not what I focus on. What I focus on is that we maintained a very healthy connection. Like, we didn't split up because we didn't love each other anymore. We split up because we were really having a hard time being happy in the situation we were in, which is
Sure.
very
Yeah.
understandable if you think about it. So,
Absolutely.
Right. What
Amazing.
what time frame from his, gosh, I guess from Lily's diagnosis to, unfortunately, his passing? What time frame was that? And how old was Lily when he passed away?
Lily was diagnosed around age 3. He was diagnosed when she turned, or right around the time she turned 4.
Mm.
Then we split up around the time she turned 5, and then he passed away just before her 10th birthday.
Wow.
So yeah, we lived separately about 4.5 years before he passed.
But she's old enough to be cognizant and aware and miss him, obviously, and be affected.
She is. And, I mentioned she uses an AAC device. And so she has an iPad. And, the iPad is actually, I have a love-hate relationship with that thing. But
As do I.
yeah. Well, because for Lily, Lily was a very busy toddler, and she liked to gather and collect things in baskets. And I mean, anything, like she would just take anything off of the counter, or it wasn't just for toys, right? It was for anything that she was interested in. That was challenging. And she was very exploratory. Like, any place we went, she would start pulling open drawers and, getting into things. And it was, it kept me in shape. That's all I can say, because I was constantly chasing after her. But then around age 12, 2010, I'm sorry, right after Lars passed away, we got her an iPad in hopes that we could access some of these communication softwares. And at first, she was interested, but didn't really know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until we moved to California that we actually accessed some training for that. And that has become life-changing for us. But she was really into the iPad. Like, she loved the iPad. She loved the pictures. And eventually she taught herself how to access YouTube and go from video to video to video. And I mean, she actually communicates through what she watches. So it's very fascinating to me now. I can't but it also grounded her. It calmed her down. Like, she went from being that busy toddler to now she's pretty comfortable just to sit there on her device, but she's not just sitting there on her device. She's actually in a world that's really comfortable for her. And she's exploring and learning. I mean, she knows so much more than I knew she knew until COVID, right? Because I had to be around her all the time. And I was like,
Yeah.
she can read. We were in school together. I'm like, she can read. She can do all these things that I didn't know she could do. And she taught herself how to do them on the iPad.
Wow.
She would watch ABA videos, and she would, and she navigates her communication software pretty well. People don't know that, because you actually have to know how to do it too in order to understand her. Right. A lot of times we think, oh, let me just give her an iPad and she can tell me what she wants. Well, she still needs help and support. Like, she can't just learn a language all by herself. But now that I know that, we've given her a voice. And so it's a lot easier to get to know her when I know what she's thinking about. And so anyway, that's just another one of those challenges and growth spurts that we've gone through. And it's been pretty amazing.
I love that we've spent a lot of time with guests and talking about the telepathy tapes and some of that stuff that, for our nonverbal autistic children. What you just said was so funny, because so many parents said the same. I had no idea of my child's capability. I had no idea they were able to read or they were able to communicate until given the access or the tool or something that provides that knowledge. I mean, that's got to be overwhelming, I would think. Yeah.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because before we had the iPad and I was able to get some confirmation to the things that Lily wanted, like she could request things and stuff like that. I used to say that to people when they would say, well, how do you guys communicate? And I would say telepathy, and that was literally like 10 years ago. That would be my answer. And I meant it, because as her parent, and I'm sure the two of you know this as well, you get to know your kids based on whatever's going on in your environment, right? And so you do sort of have this knowledge of what their preferences are and what's going to happen next. When this happens, this is going to happen. And, it becomes sort of like telepathy. Now, I wouldn't say that I could always guarantee that it was going to be that, but I had a feeling. And so that's what I was referring to. But then even now, like, I still rely on that because I know it's true. Like, I can be thinking about something or say something, and Lily will so appropriately laugh at what I say. And she really doesn't even know exactly what I'm saying, or does she? Is what I think, I'm like,
right.
So I don't underestimate her ever. And I'm open to whatever that looks like for us, like whatever our communication, I try to validate all of it, like we have our preferred methods, but I try to validate all of it, because that's what it is. Every little thing that we go through is some form of communication.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're just catching us, we're speaking with Felisa Strickland, who's involved in the ARC of California Caring Futures program, also a mom caregiver. And so amazing. Sean, are you going to pull the Caring Futures site up just to take a look at it? Can we do that?
Yes, I will. Yeah. And as I do that, why don't we go ahead and talk about a little more about the services, if you don't mind, Felisa.
Yeah, I'm going to put up on the screen, just for those who are catching us on video, caringfutures.org. And for those who are listening, it's Caring Futures, CARING FUTURES.org, caringfutures.org. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, Felisa?
Sure. Caring Futures offers future planning classes for not just aging parent caregivers. That was the motivation for the classes, but for any caregivers, that are caring for people with disabilities that need support in their own future planning, and it's also designed to help the caregiver with their future planning. So it's not necessarily about the specifics of the plans, but helping you create a roadmap, and giving you a roadmap for the things that you want to cover along the way. So it's a 6-week online class series, and it's about an hour and a half each week. And it covers all kinds of things, just what the future planning entails. We cover work, education, relationships, finances, special needs trusts, grief, and what's the word I'm looking for? End of life planning, and that kind of thing. So that's that piece of it. And then we also have Self-Care Matters, and Self-Care Matters is about teaching caregivers the importance of taking care of themselves to be the best caregivers that they can be. And then we also have a private Facebook group just for caregivers. And that is a wonderful community of caregivers that, are there to support each other, ask questions, you can learn, keep up to date with Caring Futures offerings. And then we have Caring Conversations, which is a library of conversations that we've created over the last year with all different kinds of topics. We cover supported decision-making. We cover, how to keep your benefits if you're working. We cover education, therapy, all different kinds of topics, advocacy. And so you can access that at the ARC of California's YouTube page as well.
Amazing. So as we alluded to before, technical difficulties abound. Let me see if I can share the screen. So let's just let people see the program here. I hope I don't actually know how to do it. So, here, I think I do. Here, present. Share screen. Yeah. I don't know exactly how to do this. This is where Sean's specialty comes in. So I'm going to...
This is me trying to log on this morning, so don't feel bad.
Yeah. So, okay, good. So we'll skip this part. Caringfutures.org.
You can find everything you need there. Yeah.
Great. Beautiful. So it is a beautiful website for those who are able to see it, caringfutures.org. If you know somebody who is caring for a family member or caring for somebody who needs services, I think what you mentioned, your own self-care, your own planning for, not just what do I take care of in the next few years, but what happens after I pass away and my child needs services and care, those kinds of things. A lot of times people forget that part of the financial planning, that part of the care planning, that part of it usually takes a back seat to what's immediately in front of many families. And so in the work that Sean and I do in financial services, this is the area that we talk about with neurotypical families as well. Those kinds of planning scenarios. So the fact that you provide it in the context of family members, caring for somebody with a disability, I think that's beautiful. And so those programs, are they funded by regional center? Or are they self-funded? Or are they how is that?
They're free to families. Yeah. So that's
amazing.
That's one of the things that makes it a really amazing program, because there's no charge to families to sign up for the classes. And I didn't mention, sometimes people have a hard time committing to showing up for a class every week for 6 weeks in a row. So if that's the case, we also have the self-paced version of the Future Is Now classes, and you can access that on the same classes tab on the on the website. You just go to classes, and then it'll, there's a drop down menu, and you can choose whether you want live online classes or self-paced. And the self-paced let you do it whenever you want, but you still get access to all the materials that you need. And then we also offer once a month in our Facebook group, kind of like an office hours. So I'll show up there, and if you have questions about the curriculum or anything like that, you do have access to a live person that you can talk to about whatever it is, whatever challenges you're coming
It is
into.
so amazing. And that's called The Future Is Now, that particular program that you mentioned,
Yeah,
right?
Future Is Now. That's the future planning classes.
That's brilliant. And again, I think that's the other thing, right? A lot of times parents will hear, oh, there's this great program available, but you have to pay for it. And if you're doing self-determination, that comes out of the budget, or there's a lot of considerations. The fact that it's available to families for free, again, that's brilliant, amazing. Anything else that folks should know about accessing some of the programs? Anything else that they should know about the ARC that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, I not in particular about the classes. I think I've shared most of that. I mean, the ARC is a wonderful resource for families. The ARC does an amazing job of advocating for the services and supports that we're able to access, as families that are caring for or just have kids with disabilities, or disabilities in general, individuals with disabilities. The ARC is out there representing us and our community, and advocating for the things that are going to better our lives. So being connected with the ARC of California is going to keep you informed of what is it that we're advocating for right now, how you can get involved. We have a Monday morning memo that goes out every Monday that you can subscribe to, and that kind of tells you what's going on in the disability community. And it also, gives you an update on what's coming up with Caring Futures. That's also included in there. So the Monday morning memo is something you can subscribe to, and that'll keep you up to date on what's happening with the ARC of California too.
Beautiful. What an amazing resource, which is what you hope resource centers all over are doing. And I was going to ask you, is the ARC, obviously we call the ARC of California, but is the ARC in other states as well? Is it primarily a California?
Yes. No, it is. There is the ARC of the United States, and then there are chapters of that in all of the different states. So depending on, I'm pretty sure it's I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure there's an ARC of the US chapter in almost all states. But here in California, it's called the ARC of California. And, they are also a chapter of the United States. So.
Amazing. So that's great. We have folks who tune in, listen, or watch our podcast from all over the country and outside the US as well. And so I always find, because California is so progressive, we tend to have a lot more resources available to families. And I'm always wondering, do they have it in other states that may be a little less progressive, or may have a shortage of resources available to families? So that's great to know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't know exactly where all the different chapters are in California, but there are many different chapters of the ARC of California throughout California. So, for example, there's the ARC of Ventura, there's Alpha Resource Center, the ARC of San Francisco. So there's the ARC of San Diego. So, you may, your viewers may want to, just check out where's the closest ARC of California chapter to me, or you can go to the ARC of California's website and find your local chapter as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to put that up as well. That's arcca.org.
Yes.
Is that right? Is it just arcca.org?
It's
the ARC.
Yeah, the arcca.org.
I thought I might have missed that part. So I'm going to put it up here on the site. And again, I'll spell it out for anybody who's listening. It's THEARCCA.org. I think if you split it up that way, it makes sense. It's sort of like the cadence of a phone number.
Yeah.
ARC, California, THEARCCA.org. Amazing and fascinating. And I love the fact that, again, when we started this podcast as Just Two Dads, part of it was we were surprised that we kept encountering folks who were doing amazing things for the community that who had been very involved in caring for our children had never heard of before, had never had access to, didn't even know existed. And so as we kept encountering folks, we kept saying like, oh my gosh, we should be talking about this so that everybody knows that these things are available. And we're amazed 4 years into this, we continue to find organizations that we had no idea had, such amazing resources available to our families and our community. So it really is beautiful. And I'm sure that you probably encountered that as well.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt when I moved back to California and to Santa Barbara, because I had literally been living up until that point, having no resources for my daughter other than the school system. I mean, there were special education services in Virginia, but we didn't have, just before we moved here, and after Lars got sick, I was able to access a waiver, and it was only because disabled had been added to the waiver that we were even able to access it. And that allowed for some personal care support, weekly. But other than that, there was no respite care. We didn't have a regional center service there, right? Like that's a California thing. So,
Right.
accessing any kind of disability services for her was near impossible to me, or if they existed, I didn't know about them. So, yeah, I think we're always going to be finding, because I think when we get back to the reason why we have disability services at all is because of the parents. The parents have started the advocacy, and they continue to grow it based on the needs and based on the challenges that we find, right? And so that's how we continue to grow, is when we learn new things, then we have to create the supports that we need, right? So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember when my daughter was diagnosed, sorry, Sean, about now 27 years ago, that, we went online and just started typing things in. And then we were so fortunate to find a support group that gave us access to the information. So the fact that parents are helping to sort of create and expand the offerings, but also sharing it with their community, I think that's so powerful and so needed. And I think, as you said, most families, when they get the diagnosis, they have no idea where to start or what's available or who to talk to. So again, beautiful. Sean.
Yeah, yes, I was just going to say, so there was or still is no regional center or something of the like in Virginia?
Not to my knowledge. As far as I know, the California is the only place that has a regional center service system. There might be more acts, like there's an ARC in Virginia, like the ARC of Virginia. So, those kinds of but see, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And actually, I do have a history of advocacy in my family. My grandmother had a son with Down syndrome, and he was her motivation for going to college and getting more involved. And she was the director of the Tidewater Association for, at the time, retarded children, and back in the day. And she created some of these, she was a big instrumental part in getting kids into schools, like those kinds. She was at DC legislating and that kind of thing. But I didn't at the time, like we had early intervention services, but our doctor didn't really point us in the direction of supports. We went there for supports. Well, he didn't believe they were necessary. So I think it depends on, just over time, families are the ones that, mothers and caregivers and families, they know what we need. And so they get out there and together they make it happen. But, and I think, it's a great question, Sean, because I do believe they're probably, that was, let me be clear, 25 years ago, right? Lily's 25 now. So I'm sure things have
probably something. Yeah,
there's probably better services, but at the time that we were coming through it, I didn't know how to access them, and I couldn't get a lot of information. So here in California, it was a completely different thing. We moved here. I connected with the regional center. The regional center sent me out to the different places I could access service. I just wanted that navigator when she was a little girl, but we made it. We managed, and I think we were just preparing for where we are now. So it's all good. But that kind of gave me some incentive to want to change that for families, right? Like to make sure
Yeah.
that, like Brian, I think you said earlier, our stories, sharing our stories and our experiences is what helps families realize that they're not in this by themselves, and those stories can be valuable in their own experiences.
Yep. And there's several things that's why I always tip my hat to Brian or anyone who has a child that is, significantly, a couple of years older than my own, because the further back you go in time, the more warriors we have to be, because there's less knowledge, less resources. And then you mentioned something too. You said two things. You said where we are now, and that is everything. We have to take that into consideration and context. And you just mentioned something, an entity that your grandmother was a part of that was created to make lives better for caregivers and those who care for them. Yet they used the R word, because people forget about, today we wouldn't even, we would
Yeah,
scoff at,
I
the
hesitated
use
to
of that
even
word.
I
I'm glad you
hesitated
did,
to
though. I'm
even
glad you did.
say it, but that just tells you how far we've come. I mean,
Yep.
we're talking 50 years ago when she was in
Right.
that role. So, and again, I hesitated to even say it, but I had to in order to make the point, right? So,
Mhm. Yeah, because if you didn't, I wouldn't be able to make that point. Because the other thing is, it's also has to do with one of the things we close the show with, all the time too, is talking about empathy and asking more questions and less statements and everything. Because when we know better, we do better.
exactly.
Felisa, amazing. We're at that point in the show where we're going to ask you a question. We ask all of our guests. We're always fascinated by the answer. Hopefully, you're ready for it. Sean, go ahead and let
Our
it rip.
ability to change the world is based on our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So, with that in mind, give us one example of a thought or belief you once believed strongly, but now no longer believe to be true.
What a wonderful question, and so relevant to this topic. I am going to answer that with control. Like, I have always felt like that I needed to. I always felt like I was so organized, and I had to have a plan, and I had to have a routine, and I needed to have control over situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, especially being in leadership, because like I said, I was a district sales manager, and each store had to have this, very specific set of standards, and we needed to follow the standards to keep raising the bar and sales and all the other things, right? So I had
Right.
that sort of ingrained in me. And what I've learned in being Lily's mom and her caregiver is that, it's actually sort of refreshing and freeing to let go of some of that control and just let life happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, I'm learning and I'm growing, and so is she. So just sort of letting go of some of that need to have to control everything. It's actually kind of cool just to let it go. So
Beautiful.
I
Love
get
that.
that completely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
this has been fascinating. Again, for those who are listening, we're with Felisa Strickland, who parent advocate, caregiver, and sits on the board of the Caring Futures program for the ARC, the Alpha. I'm going to mess it all up for this because there's so many sort of organizations, sub-organizations, but then I put it up on the screen, the ARC of California / Caring Futures, which can be found at caringfutures.org. Again, I'm so honored to be able to have this conversation because, again, I'm blown away by the amount of resources and educational programs that your program provides, that the organization provides. And again, I'm constantly learning. We are constantly learning about, not new to you, but new to us, new resources available for our community. So thank you for being here and being a part of our conversation today. This has really been amazing.
it's been my pleasure, and I look forward to learning more about Just Two Dads. Thank you for what you do in offering this resource, because as a parent caregiver, and we talked about it earlier,
Mm-hmm.
dads play a big role in that too. So thank you for
Yeah.
being part of that caregiving journey.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
going to talk about that. I think we have some opportunities to speak about that. We're looking forward to speaking with your organization in a couple of weeks. As we sign off, again, I want to thank Billy Footwear for always being a friend and a sponsor of the program. And for anybody who's listening on podcast outlets or WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thanks for making us part of your listening day. Again, we know you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts and where you get some value, and hopefully you were able to get access to some great information today. Feel free, please, to share this with as many people as you know who will benefit from the work that Felisa and her organization are doing. And as we sign off, I always say empathy and love is more important today, almost more important today than any other time. You never know what somebody's going through, so have some empathy before you be judgmental. And if you look at the world through the lenses of love, the world's just a much more beautiful place. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Sean. Thank you again, Felisa, but I'm going to throw it to Sean to close us out.
That it is. Thank you so very much. Thank you for being here, Felisa. We look forward to, again, working with you very soon. We'll be promoting the event that we are doing with her organization. You'll see that on social media as well. To everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you so much for tuning in. Like Brian says, we know that you have a lot of options out there with podcasts. I think there's probably a new podcast for every minute of the day. So we appreciate you taking the time. Remember that questions are more powerful than statements. Let's try and be a little bit more childlike and less childish. We need each other. Everybody needs to be seen, heard, and loved, and wants the same thing. We also want to encourage you, if you are a male caregiver or dad, you can feel free to check out our men's group, which is called The Den. You can email us at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com, whether you've got questions about episodes, anyone that you think might make a good guest, any topic that might be of interest and value to you. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so very much. We love you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again, Felisa. Bye, everybody.